What would you do if the only thing that made you feel alive was also the thing that people around you said was wrong? I had asked myself this question many times, and each time the answer became harder to find. My story is not about wild romance or loud passion. It is about something softer. It is about finding peace, then being told by the world that peace itself was not allowed. My name is Elena, and I was 59 when this began. I lived in a small coastal town. The air often smelled of salt, and the streets were quiet except for the sound of gulls flying over the harbor. My life had been simple for many years. I ran a small flower stall near the train station. It was not much, but it gave me something to do each day. My husband had died almost a decade earlier, and my only daughter lived in another country. She called sometimes, but mostly I lived alone. My neighbors were polite but distant. People in small towns often watched each other more than they spoke to each other. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments below. And if you feel this story touches your heart, please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. Most of my days followed the same rhythm. I woke up early, prepared flowers for the stall, smiled at strangers who passed by, then returned home to a quiet flat. In the evenings, I would cook something simple, sit by the window with a book, and then go to sleep. It was not an unhappy life, but it was a silent one. Sometimes I wondered if I had already lived the most important parts of my life, and now I was simply waiting for the days to pass. One afternoon in early spring, I was arranging tulips when a young man stopped in front of the stall. He was holding a broken book in his hands. The cover was torn, and some pages were bent. He asked me if I had any tape he could borrow. His voice was calm, and his eyes carried a softness that surprised me. I found some tape in the drawer and gave it to him. He thanked me and smiled. His smile was not quick or careless. It was steady, as if he was fully present in that moment. I did not think much of it then, but something about the way he held that book stayed in my mind after he left. A few days later, I saw him again. This time he was sitting on a bench near the station, reading the same book. The afternoon was windy, and some petals from my stall blew across the street toward him. He bent down, picked up a flower that had fallen, and walked over to return it. He said, "This belongs to you." I thanked him. Our eyes met for a second longer than usual, and then he left. Soon I began noticing him more often. Sometimes he passed by the stall on his way to the library. Other times I saw him near the bakery, carrying a bag of bread. He never stared or tried to force conversation, but whenever our eyes met, he gave a small, respectful smile. It was not the smile of someone amused. It was the smile of someone who sees you as human. That was rare for me. One morning, the rain came hard and fast. I was closing the stall when I slipped slightly on the wet pavement. Before I could fall, someone caught my arm. It was him. He held me steady and asked if I was all right. I nodded, though my heart was beating faster than usual. He said his name was Matteo. He was 34 years old and worked part-time at the library while also repairing old instruments in his spare time. He lived alone in a small flat above the repair shop. He told me his parents had moved abroad when he was young and that he had mostly raised himself. After that rainy day, he sometimes stopped at the stall not to buy flowers, but to talk for a few minutes. At first, the conversations were light. He asked about the weather, the town, or which flowers lasted longest in water. But slowly the words became warmer. He told me about his grandmother, who had loved music and raised him until her death. I told him about my husband and about how empty the house had felt after he was gone. Neither of us spoke with drama or heavy detail, but each time we spoke, it felt as if a small piece of silence inside me broke away. One evening, when I was walking home with heavy bags of supplies, Matteo appeared. He carried the bags all the way to my door and placed them gently on the table inside. He did not stay long, only said, "You should not carry so much weight alone." Then he left. But that moment changed something in me. It was not about the bags. It was about the way he looked at me when he said those words, as if he knew I had been carrying more than just groceries. After that, he visited me from time to time. Sometimes he brought fresh bread, sometimes an old book he thought I might like. We would sit by the window with tea and talk about small things, music, travel, the town's history. His voice was steady, and his eyes always looked directly into mine when he spoke. I realized one evening, after he left, that no one had looked at me that way in years. Not as a widow, not as a tired woman past middle age, but as someone still alive and worth listening to. As weeks passed, I began to wait for those visits. I started choosing brighter scarves in the morning, not for him, but because I wanted to see myself differently. I even added a few new plants to the stall, something I had not bothered with in years. My daughter called one weekend, and she noticed my voice sounded lighter. She asked if something had changed. I said no, but inside I knew something had. Yet with this new light came shadows of doubt. At night, when the house was silent, questions filled my mind. Why was a man his age spending time with a woman like me? I was nearly 60, my hair was turning silver, my hands had grown rough from years of work. I lived simply. What could I possibly give him? Was it pity? Was he only being kind? And what if people started to notice? Small towns never stay quiet for long. One morning, I found something outside my door. It was a small folded piece of paper tucked into a flower pot. The handwriting was simple, almost childlike. It said, "Your presence is the calmest part of my day." I read it twice, then a third time. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with something I had not felt in years. Warmth, hope, a softness that reached deep inside me. That day, I smiled more than usual. I worked at the stall with a lighter heart. When people passed by, I greeted them with energy I thought I had lost. In the mirror, I still saw the same face, with lines of age, but in my heart, something new had started. Maybe it was friendship. Maybe it was something more. I did not name it. All I knew was that after many silent years, my heart had begun to move again. The note from Matteo stayed with me for days. I did not reply, and I did not need to. Something inside me changed after reading those words. I walked through the market with lighter steps. I stood at my flower stall with a softer smile. I even began dressing with more care, not for him, but for myself. For many years, I had seen myself as a widow, as a woman whose best years were behind her. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I still saw lines on my face and silver in my hair, but I also saw someone alive. Matteo continued to visit. Sometimes he brought nothing at all, only his presence. We sat together with tea, letting the silence rest between us. It was not an empty silence. It was a silence that felt safe, a silence that spoke more than words. He asked about my week, and I told him about small things. Then one evening, without planning to, I told him about the day my husband had died. I told him about the hospital room, about the moment I realized I was alone, about how my daughter cried for a while and then returned to her life. I explained that I never allowed myself to cry fully because I had to be strong for others. I thought Matteo might change the subject, but he did not. He simply said, "You can keep talking." And I did. I spoke more than I had in years. He listened without judgment. He did not try to give advice or tell me to move on. He just listened. When I finally stopped, he said, "You have lived through pain, yet you still smile. That is strength." His words filled me with quiet warmth. No one had ever said that to me before. Over the next few weeks, I realized what made him different. It was not his age, though he was younger. It was his heart. He did not treat me as if I were invisible. He did not treat me as if my time had passed. He treated me like a person with feelings, with stories, with value. That was something I had longed for, but had not found, even in my marriage. One evening, he asked me if I had ever wanted to travel. I laughed and told him I once dreamed of seeing the sea in another country, but then life had pulled me into work, marriage, and motherhood. He looked at me with steady eyes and said, "There is still time." Those words stayed with me long after he left. People rarely spoke to me as if I still had a future. Most people assumed older women only looked back, not forward. But Matteo's words made me believe I still had pages to write. The joy of these moments came with worry as well. At night, when I sat alone, I asked myself if I was imagining too much. Was this friendship or something more? Did he feel the same calm I felt, or was I reading meaning where there was none? I was afraid to ask him. I did not want to break what we had. I did not want to lose the one gentle light that had entered my life after so many silent years. Then one afternoon, I went to the bakery to buy bread. As I walked past two women from the neighborhood, I heard them whisper. They said my name. They said Matteo's name too. And then one word came clear: shame. My chest tightened. My hands felt cold. I kept walking, pretending not to hear, but their voices stayed in my mind. Later, another neighbor looked at me with a smile that was not kind. I smiled back, but it felt heavy. That night, my flat felt colder than usual. I sat in silence, asking myself questions I could not answer. Was I wrong to feel peace in Matteo's company? Was it shameful for a woman my age to enjoy the presence of a younger man? I had not broken any law. I had not betrayed anyone. I had lived carefully all my life, and yet, because of simple tea and small smiles, I was being judged. The next evening, Matteo visited. He looked at me with concern and said, "I think people are talking." I stayed quiet. He continued, "I do not care what they say. I care how you feel." His voice was soft, but his words were strong. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that what we shared was enough, that the world outside did not matter. But fear began to grow inside me. I feared losing him. I feared my daughter finding out and turning away. I feared being alone again after finally opening my heart. That weekend, my daughter called. Her voice was sharp. She asked about a man people had seen with me. She said his name. I felt my chest sink. I told her he was simply a kind person, someone who helped me sometimes. She did not believe me. She said he was half my age, that people were talking, that I was making a fool of myself. Before I could explain, she ended the call. I sat holding the phone in silence. Tears rolled down my face, not because of the gossip, but because my own daughter could not see the truth of my heart. She did not ask if I was happy. She did not ask if I felt alive again. She only cared about what others might say. The next time Mateo came, my smile was missing. I made tea, but I spoke little. He noticed and asked what had happened. I told him everything. I told him about the whispers, about my daughter's harsh words, about the fear that was now sitting inside me. He listened carefully. Then he said something that shook me. I know I am younger. I know this is not what people expect, but peace is rare. I never had it with my family. I never had it with women my age. With you, I feel safe and honest. If people cannot accept that, it is their problem, not ours. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. For a moment, the noise of the world faded. For a moment, I believed that peace could be enough. That night, I wrote in a small notebook I kept by my bed. They may whisper, but I will not give away what makes my soul calm. Still, the conflict inside me did not disappear. Each day, I wondered what choice I would make. Would I protect myself by stepping away from Mateo? Or would I protect the small piece of life I had regained, even if the world called it wrong? After the call with my daughter, something inside me felt heavier. I was not angry. I was tired of explaining myself, tired of proving that peace was not shameful. I had lived carefully my whole life. I had worked, paid bills, raised my child, and stayed quiet when I wanted to cry. And now, when I found something soft, something kind, people wanted to take it from me. When Mateo came the next day, his knock was gentle. His eyes were steady, not filled with questions, but with care. I opened the door, and he said, "You do not need to speak. I understand." But I wanted to speak. I wanted to say words that had been stuck in me for years. I told him, "I am not young. I am not beautiful. I am not perfect. But when you sit near me, I feel alive again, and I do not want to lose that." He did not move. He only looked at me as if my words mattered. Then he said, "I never came here to see your age. I came here because your presence feels like home." His words went deep inside me. We sat down with tea that grew cold as the evening passed, and silence became our comfort once again. Over time, Mateo told me more of his own story. He spoke of a woman from his past, someone closer to his own age, who had cared for his looks and energy, but not his heart. When he needed support, she walked away. She said he was too soft, not strong enough. From that day, he promised himself he would never stay where he was unseen. When he met me, he said he did not expect anything, but he felt peace. That was enough. I wanted to believe that peace was enough. But the world around us refused to stay silent. One morning, a neighbor passed me and smiled in a way that cut deep. The smile said more than words. The gossip had spread, and I felt it everywhere. Then one evening, my daughter called again. Her voice was cold. "Is it true?" she asked. I did not ask what she meant. I said, "Yes, Mateo and I spend time together." She grew angry. She said I had embarrassed the family, that people were talking, that I was ruining my name. I tried to tell her how Mateo made me feel respected, how he brought me calm after years of silence. But she did not listen. She ended the call. I sat there with tears falling, not because of her words, but because my own child could not see what was in my heart. That night, I thought about ending it all with Mateo. I thought maybe it was easier to return to silence, easier to live alone than to fight the world. But when I saw him again, his voice reminded me of what was real. He said, "I did not come into your life to please the world. I came because I feel safe with you. If they cannot see that, it is their wound, not ours." Still, I knew life would not get easier. The whispers grew. People said he wanted money or comfort or a home. They did not know that I had little to give, only a small stall and a modest flat. But gossip does not need truth, it only needs noise. One evening, as we sat together, Mateo grew quiet. Then he looked at me with nervous eyes. He said, "I do not want to hide anymore. Will you share your life with me fully?" My heart raced. Marriage at my age felt impossible. But his words were not about age. They were about honesty. They were about saying yes to peace. I did not answer at once. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. I asked if I still believed in love, or at least in the right to live honestly. Deep inside, I heard a voice say yes. The next morning, I told Mateo, "Yes, we will stand together." We did not plan a grand wedding. There was no music, no guests. We signed papers, exchanged small rings, and sat together in the quiet. That was enough. We did not need the world's approval. We only needed to say to each other, "You matter to me." But the world noticed anyway. Neighbors whispered louder. My daughter stopped calling. For months, silence filled the phone line. That was the hardest part. I had given her everything, and now she turned away because I had chosen something for myself. It broke me. But Mateo held me through it. He did not speak big promises. He simply stayed. That was enough. Over time, the noise around us grew softer. People found other things to talk about. But the silence from my daughter still hurt. Then one Sunday morning, while Mateo and I were tending to plants on the balcony, the doorbell rang. I opened it and froze. It was my daughter, standing with her husband and children. I had not seen them in nearly a year. We sat in the living room. For a long time, no one spoke. Then my daughter looked at me with sad eyes. She said, "I thought he was using you. I thought you had lost your mind, but I can see he respects you. He is not here for things. He is here for you." Tears filled my eyes. Mateo said nothing. He only sat quietly, letting her speak. That was his way, gentle, respectful. In that moment, something broken began to heal. My daughter did not fully understand, but she began to accept. That evening, after they left, I sat with Mateo under the fading sky. I told him, "Thank you for not giving up on us." He smiled and said, "No one gives up on something real. They only wait until others finally see it." 1 year passed. Mateo and I found our rhythm. We shared mornings, evenings, and the small moments that fill a life. People still whispered sometimes, but their voices no longer reached us. When we sat together, the world outside faded. I often thought back to the woman I was. Before Mateo entered my life, silent, lonely, resigned. And I thought of who I had become, not rescued, not saved, but seen as someone with worth, someone still alive. For that, I was grateful. If people asked me why, I answered simply, because peace should never feel wrong. If my story touched your heart, tell me in the comments what it meant to you. Do you believe peace should ever feel wrong? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story. and share this one with someone who needs to hear it today.